I should have trusted her eyes from the very beginning. If there's one thing years in the ER have taught me, it's that numbers can look fine, machines can stay quiet, and still something can be terribly wrong. But on that night, one of the longest of my career, I relied on the vitals in front of me instead of the silent message coming from a woman who could barely whisper. If I had listened to her eyes sooner, maybe things would have unfolded differently. I still think about that shift more often than I'd like to admit. The night started with chaos, like most night shifts do. Hallway beds full, triage overflowing, ambulance bay lights blinking nonstop. I had barely clocked in when charge assigned me to Zone C, meaning I'd get the highest acuity overflow. Great. Another night of sprinting between alarms and anxious families. I tied my hair back, grabbed the scanner from the charger, and told myself the same thing I always do. Just keep moving, one patient at a time. Don't let the night swallow you. I didn't know she'd be the one to test every ounce of instinct I had. She arrived through triage around 9:30 p.m. Thin, pale, mid-50s maybe, walking slowly but steady. Her daughter walked beside her with one hand on her back as if afraid she might disappear if she let go. The triage nurse flagged her as moderate priority. Nothing too urgent. Mostly vague symptoms. Dizziness, fatigue, chest pressure that wasn't exactly pain, and a strange sense of not feeling right. Those words, not feeling right, are the bane of every ER nurse's existence. They can mean absolutely nothing or absolutely everything. When triage brought her back and assigned her to me, I greeted her with my typical tired smile and a quick introduction. She returned a polite nod, but her eyes, they were searching, unsettled, almost pleading. It wasn't fear exactly, more like she was trying to communicate something she couldn't put into words. I didn't take it seriously enough. I ran through the intake questions, listening to her describe how the symptoms had started that afternoon while she was folding laundry. Nothing intense, nothing sudden, just off. Her vitals were stable. Blood pressure slightly high, but nothing shocking for someone who clearly looked uncomfortable. Oxygen levels fine, heart rate fine, temp fine. I entered the numbers into the system while she watched me with this expression that made me pause for half a second. You know when someone looks at you like they're waiting for you to figure out what they can't say? That was her. I should have asked more. Instead, I just smiled and told her we'd run some labs and keep an eye on her. Her daughter looked relieved, but she didn't. If anything, the woman's shoulders sank a little deeper, like she thought I'd missed something crucial. I brushed it off as anxiety. The ER was loud around us, monitors beeping, someone coughing down the hall, a paramedic giving report to another nurse. The perfect environment for missing small details. And in the ER, the small details are always the ones that bite you later. When I returned after sending her to get blood drawn, she was sitting upright in the stretcher, hands neatly clasped, eyes unfocused. I asked how she was feeling. She answered, "Still not right." But again, the vitals didn't match her voice. They didn't match her eyes. Everything was steady. Even the cardiac monitor looked almost bored. I checked her vitals a second time, manually, just to be extra safe. They were fine. Perfectly fine. I reassured her and told her we'd wait for labs. Then I left the room because another patient needed me urgently. That was the moment I replay the most. When she whispered, barely audible, "Please don't leave too long." At the time, I thought she meant she was scared of being alone. Now I think she was trying, in the only way she could, to tell me something was building inside her body that none of the machines could detect yet. The shift went on. The noise grew louder, and more patients kept coming. But every time I walked past her room, I felt her watching me. Not in an eerie way, but in a don't forget me way. It was subtle, quiet, persistent, and I ignored it. About an hour later, her labs came back. Some numbers were slightly abnormal, but nothing alarming enough to trigger immediate action. The provider ordered more tests, including an EKG, which also looked fairly normal, except for one tiny irregularity that wasn't quite significant on its own. The kind of small detail that makes providers shrug and say, "We'll keep monitoring." Monitoring. The word that makes everyone feel safe. Except sometimes, monitoring is just another way of saying we're hoping nothing happens before we figure out what's going on. I went back to her room to attach the EKG leads and set everything up. She looked more tired than before. Her breathing wasn't labored, but it was off. Too controlled. Too intentional. Like she was concentrating on each breath. Her daughter stood beside her, rubbing her shoulder. I checked vitals again. Still fine. But when I leaned close to adjust one of the leads on her chest, she held my wrist lightly. Not tightly, not urgently, just enough to make me stop. And she looked straight into my eyes. Those eyes. Those were the eyes of someone whose body was whispering a secret that the machines weren't hearing. She said, "Something is wrong." Not in panic, not in confusion, in certainty. That was when my stomach tightened for the first time. My instincts poked me like a finger tapping my shoulder. I asked her where she felt it, what kind of wrong, how long she'd felt it. But she couldn't explain. She just shook her head, eyes glistening, and breathed shallowly. I stepped out and told the provider I didn't like how she looked. He asked for specifics. I didn't have them. Vitals were stable, monitors quiet, labs inconclusive. I only had a gut feeling and the memory of the way she held my wrist. He nodded but didn't rush. "Okay, keep an eye on her. Let me know if she changes." Changes. She already had, but not in a way the system knows how to categorize. I went back in and stayed a little longer this time, asking more questions, reassessing her, encouraging slow breaths. She thanked me. Then her eyes drifted toward the ceiling as if she were listening for something only she could hear. A few minutes later, I had to step out again for another patient, a man loudly demanding pain meds, and by the time I returned, the woman's daughter was standing near the doorway, wringing her hands. "She's getting worse," she whispered. I rushed inside. The woman was sitting taller now, shoulders tense, eyes wide, not in fear, but in a strange clarity, as if something had shifted. Her vitals? Still fine, perfectly normal, but her skin tone? Slightly duller. Her forehead? A subtle sheen of sweat. The pulse in her neck? Just a little too fast for what the machine was reading. Machines lie more often than people realize. I asked her a series of rapid questions. She nodded weakly, but then her eyes fixed on mine again. And there it was. That same message. That silent plea. "You are missing something." I called the provider again, more firm this time. "I don't like her presentation. Something's brewing." He sighed, busy, overwhelmed, tired. "Order another EKG and repeat labs. We'll reevaluate." As I walked back into her room, she reached for my hand again, but this time with more urgency. And for the briefest second, I felt her pulse skip. That was it. That was the first measurable sign that something inside her body was preparing to reveal itself. But by the time I grabbed the EKG machine and returned, everything changed at once. Her expression, so full of quiet fear, shifted into something else. Her jaw tightened, her posture stiffened, and her eyes widened with the realization that her body had crossed a threshold. Machine still read normally, but she didn't look normal anymore. Something was about to happen, something big, something fast. "Stay with me," I told her. "I'm right here." And then her breathing changed, one subtle shift that sent adrenaline straight through me. The daughter gasped, asking what was happening. I didn't answer because the truth was I didn't know yet, but I knew enough to call for help. "Charge! I need someone in room 14 now." The provider heard the urgency in my voice and rushed over. The daughter stepped aside as more staff entered, and suddenly, the quiet room filled with bodies, carts, equipment, voices. Everything was escalating. And yet the machines, unbelievably, still didn't scream. But her eyes did. And those eyes were telling me time was running out. Those next seconds felt stretched, elongated, as if the room itself knew something was shifting beneath the surface. I stood at her side, one hand on her shoulder, the other on the monitor cables, watching her every breath. She wasn't panicking, not outwardly, but the quiet intensity in her expression told me she was fighting something we couldn't see yet. The tension around her mouth, the way her fingers curled slightly against the blanket, the tremble in her chin. Each tiny sign layered itself on top of the others until it formed a message so clear I could practically hear it. Pay attention. I'm slipping. I checked her vitals again, manually this time. They read fine. Too fine, suspiciously fine. A kind of calm right before a storm reveals itself. Machines like patterns, stability, predictability. But the human body doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes it hides its warnings until the last possible moment, leaving only instinct, only a nurse's intuition, to bridge the gap. When the provider stepped in and asked me what had changed, I didn't have a neat, clean answer, only a truth that didn't fit neatly into a chart. "She's different," I said. "She looks like she's compensating for something. She's working too hard to stay stable." He glanced at the monitor, at the numbers glowing confidently, then back at the woman. He frowned. "Let's get that repeat EKG." I nodded and reached for the machine, but before I could place the leads, her daughter's voice broke through the noise in the hall. "Mom? Hey, look at me." Her tone was tight, shaky, a daughter's instinct mirroring mine. The woman opened her eyes wider, but they didn't focus on her daughter. They focused on me. And in that moment, everything inside me went cold. Those eyes weren't pleading anymore. They were warning. A single breath later, it happened. The shift we had all been waiting for. The moment the body stops pretending and reveals the fight it has been hiding. Her breathing stuttered. Her shoulders tensed. Her gaze unfocused. And her pulse, which had been quietly skipping beneath the surface, suddenly surged. "Starting EKG," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But then I noticed the slightest movement, her hand slipping off the bed rail, her head tilting just enough to show she wasn't fully present anymore. "Ma'am?" I leaned close. "Stay with me." No response. Then, finally, the monitor caught up. A rapid spike, a sudden drop, then a rhythm that was not a rhythm at all. "Here we go," I said under my breath. "She's declaring herself." Everything happened fast after that, too fast for words to fully keep up. The provider stepped in beside me, issuing orders. The daughter backed against the wall, covering her mouth with both hands. More staff arrived. Respiratory, another nurse, charge nurse, another provider from the opposite side of the department. The room transformed from quiet concern to organized urgency. We repositioned her, placed pads, connected equipment, anticipated what might be needed next. Her eyes fluttered, but they no longer held the sharp, silent message from earlier. They looked distant, unfocused, as if she were drifting somewhere we couldn't reach. "Stay with us," I whispered as I adjusted her oxygen. "You told me something was wrong. I hear you now. I'm not leaving you." But her body was unraveling faster than we could intervene. The monitor jerked between patterns, too fast, too irregular, then too slow. The provider raised his voice, calling for meds, evaluating her perfusion, coordinating every move. He wasn't calm anymore. No one was. The shift from skepticism to urgency is always instant when the body finally decides to show its cards. And yet, through all of it, I couldn't stop replaying her earlier words. Something is wrong. She knew long before any of us did. When her consciousness wavered again, I leaned close so she could hear me. "I'm right here. Look at me." She tried. Her gaze drifted, then sharpened for half a second. A flash, a spark of recognition, before fading again. The provider shouted another order. Someone pushed meds. Someone else adjusted equipment. The air grew thick with tension, the kind that grips everyone in the room and tightens around your ribs. "Stay with us," her daughter begged from the corner. "Please stay." Her mother's breathing hitched. A soft, trembling exhale escaped her chest, and her fingers curled weakly toward the blanket. The monitor trembled again in response, alarms finally catching up to the truth we'd been sensing all along. I called out numbers rapidly: heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen levels. And with each passing second, they revealed the steep slope her body was sliding down. The provider moved in close, reassessing, preparing the next intervention. Then something happened that I still remember with absolute clarity. The woman opened her eyes again and looked directly at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. Those eyes were no longer pleading or warning. They were trusting that we were doing everything we could, trusting that someone was finally listening, trusting that she wasn't alone. That moment lasted less than a second before another wave hit her body, pulling her deeper into the fight. We worked on her intensely for what felt like hours, but was probably closer to minutes. Her daughter cried softly in the corner, whispering prayers into her hands. The air filled with instructions, footsteps, the rustle of gloves and equipment, the pulse of urgency moving through all of us. Gradually, slowly, her numbers began to stabilize. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but enough. Her body responded to the interventions. Enough for the provider to nod, exhale, and move into the next phase of management. Enough for us to reposition her carefully, adjust her monitors, and prepare for transport to a higher level of care. And enough for me to step back for a moment, heart pounding, adrenaline still heavy in my limbs. Her daughter rushed to her side, tears falling freely now. "Mom, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered. She blinked once, twice, then focused weakly on her daughter. Relief washed over the entire room like a breath finally released. We handed her off to the ICU team after several more rounds of stabilization. As they transferred her to their care, she reached once more. Not for her daughter this time, but for me. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand, a faint, deliberate gesture. Her eyes found mine again. The message was different this time. "Thank you." I swallowed hard and squeezed her hand gently before letting go. After the ICU team left with her, the room felt strangely empty, like all the weight we'd been carrying suddenly lifted, but left us shaky from the effort. I removed the equipment, cleaned the space, reset everything for the next patient. But I couldn't shake the thought that had been chewing at my chest since the moment she first arrived. I had checked her vitals twice, but her eyes told me a different story, a story I should have listened to sooner. It's easy to trust machines. They're reliable, unemotional, consistent, but the human body whispers long before it screams, and sometimes the only place you can hear it is in the eyes of the person in front of you. I never forgot her. Not her face, not her voice, not the way she held my wrist when she needed me to listen, not the way she fought, not the way she looked at me when the worst of it passed. Every shift since then, I remind myself of that night, of the woman who knew her body better than any monitor ever could, of the warning hidden in her eyes, of the message only instinct could hear. Now, whenever a patient tells me they don't feel right, I stop. I listen. I look them in the eyes and wait for the truth behind the words. Because sometimes the real story isn't in the numbers, it's in the silence, and silence speaks loudly if you're willing to hear it. Thank you for watching and staying with me through this entire story. It means more than you know. If this video moved you or gave you a new perspective on the work we do in the ER, Please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing it with someone who appreciates true stories from the front lines of healthcare. Your support helps this channel grow and allows more people to hear stories like this. Thank you again for being here. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next video.